Today, I'm joined by Bethany Graver, a leadership coach who has spent more than 2 decades guiding and building teams in the world of hospitality. In this conversation, we explore why Bethany calls curiosity a superpower, the mindset shifts that allow leaders to grow, and what it takes to really build teams that communicate, take ownership, and perform at a high level. Bethany has a grounded, practical way of seeing people and systems. This is a conversation about what it takes to actually drive growth, both personally and within your organization. I hope you find something in here that helps you lead with more clarity and intention, and you just find value out of this conversation. And now, here's my conversation with Bethany Graver. In the conversation prep form that I sent over to you, you mentioned that curiosity is a superpower. So I'm curious
Absolutely.
to learn, how has curiosity shaped who you are and your career?
When I apply more of a curious mindset, and what that looks like in action is, I go into a conversation or an opportunity to learn something in a course or, something that I'm doing, asking what can I learn here
Mm,
rather than just having no intention at all or being ready to talk about what I know about the subject.
mm,
Um, I cannot think of a single time where I haven't walked away from that conversation or that event smarter, learning something that I didn't know before. There's a fly around me. Sorry for the
yeah,
waving.
yeah.
Um, feeling more, feeling feeling like the time was spent better in
Hmm.
relationships. I think this is super important. It's important, it's a superpower in any way that you apply it. But in relationships, whether those are professional relationships, whether it's me to a client, me to somebody that I'm leading in a team, me to my business partner, operating from a place of curiosity helps me to connect with that person better, right? So if
Hmm.
we are going into potentially a difficult conversation, or if it's a sales conversation and I'm trying to negotiate a contract with a new client, when I go into that from the mindset of I'm the subject matter expert here. I am
Hmm.
the consultant providing insight, information, and guidance to my prospective client, or to the team member, the leader that I'm coaching or having a conversation with. I almost always miss a lot of opportunities. Um, Versus when I approach things with more curiosity, we get to the point faster. I learned something about that person that helps me to understand their situation better. If this is a sales conversation, then it gives me maybe some leverage around how I can demonstrate how my service is going to improve their experience as a
Hmm.
business owner or a business leader. Or if it's with somebody that I'm coaching, then it helps me to understand how to put things in terms that they understand. We ultimately walk away from the conversation with a better understanding of what each of us needs to do going forward. A lot of that tension that happens when you're in a sales person versus client conversation, I'm sure you know all
Yep.
about that.
Oh yeah. Yep.
When you spend a little bit of time at the beginning, like really demonstrating, like I'd really want to know a little bit more about you.
Yep.
Or it's also where instead of waiting while you're talking to me, like in my mind, I'm preparing a conversation or I'm preparing a reply to the thing that you're saying. And I'm really not listening to anything that you have to say. Right. And I think that
Not that
happens
I'm
more.
doing that right now at all.
Yeah. Well, I think probably in certain contexts that is the point.
Yep.
But overall, I think that's the way the majority of people communicate
Hmm.
is I'm just waiting for your face to stop moving so I can say the thing that I'm going to
Right.
say. And then we might walk away getting nowhere with what the intention of our conversation was, or even having like a little bit of a barrier between us. But curiosity helps you be more collaborative. It helps connection. It helps you to relate to people. It helps you to understand, especially if you're trying to provide a service. Helps you to understand more about how you could provide that service, or in some cases I have determined not to sign an agreement with somebody after approaching with more curiosity and learning more about the opportunity that has made it obvious that it wasn't in alignment with my values. So, which I would have totally missed if I had just gone in there with the sole objective of stating my pitch or,
Uh-huh.
having the upper hand in the conversation.
Love it. Yeah, what I'm hearing, as I'm listening to what you were, how you're explaining curiosity as a superpower is curiosity, taking that frame of being curious about the person that you're talking to forces you to listen. And I think listening is something that uh, we all can get better at, and just listening when the other person's talking, right? You kind of described, instead of just thinking about what you're going to say as soon as they're done talking, but just truly listening. And I feel like that frame of curiosity forces you to just really listen and be interested in what the other person is saying. And that's something that one of my friends, Jeff, said to me a couple of years ago when I was just asking him, like, hey, how can I meet new people? How can I build relationships? How can I, get to know people better? Or like, how can I be more interesting? And he's like, the best way to be interesting is to be interested. And I think that's
Yeah.
just another way of saying, just be curious about the person. Just find something that, like, what are you curious about this person? What do you want to know? Um, but I think to summarize, what curiosity as a superpower, kind of like how that plays out, is it just forces you to listen, which I think is really great. For you, when you were, after you read that book, read it in the book, how did you kind of foster that frame? Like, as I'm sure at this point it's become just a habit for you, but were you intentional about it at first? Like, how did you kind of
Oh,
instill
yeah.
that curiosity?
So at that time, I was with Original Chop Shop when I had read um, that quote, or saw the
Mhm,
content that curiosity is a superpower. I was with Original Chop Shop. I had 8 or 9 stores under that were reporting to me, that I was responsible for leading.
mhm,
And we had just grown really quickly. And so we had more people on the team that were in position for less than 2 years than we had people that were there for more than 2 years. And I was not mentally well from all of that. I had no, I was really frustrated with the amount of time I had to spend reviewing and reiterating expectations.
mhm,
And I've always wanted to be at the top of every scorecard and KPI sheet in any work environment that I've been in.
mhm,
So, and in at that point, I was probably 7 or so years into a multi-unit leadership role, which is so much different than being in a single unit leadership role, where I had to,
and
um,
multi-unit, just to clarify, means like multiple different locations. You were a
multi,
leader for multiple.
yeah.
Got it.
So before I was like the GM of a restaurant, and
Yeah.
then I moved into multi-unit and I had to, essentially do the same thing I was able to do with one restaurant, but do it through people in 8 or 9 different restaurants, which
Wow.
was, I did not have like really any adequate training for how that mindset shift is, but
Mhm,
I was really frustrated with not getting results and with saying, well, I have told them the expectation. I've like put it in a presentation and I've done a little meeting about it. And what am I missing here? Because they aren't getting it, or at least I'm not getting the results that I know I could get if I
mhm,
were the one for this operation day in and day out. And then I heard that curiosity is a superpower. And without, regurgitating the entire thing, essentially, it probably summarized exactly like you just did. That, and what I got out of it is that I was not listening. I was walking into, or getting on the phone with the leaders of these restaurants. I was, basically like forcing my operational systems, my thought patterns onto them. I wasn't honoring their creative, the reason that I'd selected them to be the general managers of these restaurants, right? Like they didn't just get handed to me. I selected them. And I did that for a number of reasons of their skill sets, qualifications, behavioral, the way that they showed up in the interview, all the different reasons that led to me choosing them to be the GMs of those restaurants. And then I totally disregarded all of that by saying, well, I'm the boss. You listen to what I have to say. This is the way that you do it. This is the way you
yeah,
should think about it. And I was not getting results. And then I read this content and I was like, okay, this feels like it's a game changer for me. It definitely struck me like right between my eyes, a lot of different areas in that content where
Hmm.
I recognized that I was not a very curious person. I was kind of a know-it-all, right? I was like,
Sure.
well, I've been doing this for X amount of years and blah, 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 blah. So, how I applied that was I have had a very long-standing daily journaling practice.
Mm.
The first hour of my day, I journal, I read something, I get quiet, I don't get on my phone. I usually go for a workout right after that happens. In my journaling practice specifically, I've got journal prompts. Some of them, if I'm feeling uninspired, I'll get them externally. But I always try to you have a journal prompt that is really meaningful for whatever I'm going through, whatever I'm working to solve for or improve in my life. And so in this moment in time, it was being more successful in leading people with
Mm.
results that matched my efforts. And the way that I was going to change my approach was through curiosity. So, and this is way before ChatGPT, which probably would have given me even more excellent questions to ask myself every day.
Right.
But I just started thinking about what journal prompts would help me to, think through and write through what my experiences were. How did I show up curious the day before? How did
Mm.
that result in a what was the experience I got from that? What would I have done differently? What did I learn through that process of, going in and being prepared to be quiet for the majority of the time that I was in conversation and just get
Listening.
really good at asking questions, right? What did I
Yeah.
learn from that? What would I do differently? And so that was part of my journal process, at least I'm going to say a year, because it just, it started out as a single focus. Like, I want to be more successful. I need to learn how to impact and lead my team better. That was the purpose for starting the journey of curiosity. And then
Mm.
it just became so evident to me that I needed to apply that in every area of my life. And so that journal prompt became, pretty pivotal to me having a mindset shift and approaching that more naturally.
I love that you call it the journey of curiosity, right? It's not something that you just snap your fingers and it just happens. You're instantly going to be more curious, but you forced yourself to kind of confront the question or the prompt of how could I be more curious today, or how was I more curious yesterday, or what did I learn out of curiosity the other day? But just having that time set every morning where you were intentionally um, addressing that curiosity lens that you were nurturing and trying to build into a habit, which is great. So, how does that curiosity as a superpower translate into how you coach the leaders that you do today? Like, how do you infuse that curiosity lens into what you're coaching leaders through? And then I guess how can you almost expedite that process? So for you, maybe it took a year. I'm not sure if it can go any faster, but is there a way that you can expedite the process to kind of infuse the leaders that you're coaching with that curiosity lens a little bit quicker, if that makes sense? So kind of two-pronged question. How does that curiosity as a superpower show up in how you coach your leaders that you do today? And then is there anything that you do to kind of expedite that process for them of adopting that curiosity lens?
Yeah. So the first part of that is I ask a lot of questions. So, and I've gotten really nerdy about finding great questions to ask, right? Because not all
Nice.
questions are created equal. Some are pretty surface level or kind of throwaway questions. And then there's some where, I often, when I'm in any conversation, whether it's coach client, um, just friends, having conversations with this has just become part of who I am. And
Uh-huh.
I pretty frequently hear people say, "Wow, that's a really good question that I haven't thought of before."
Yeah.
So I feel like I'm doing it right through
Mhm.
that measurement. But there is a particular strategy in that I learned from one of my HR business partner mentors, um, called the 5 whys. So
Mm.
if I'm talking through a problem with somebody and I'm trying to help them, because truly, if you can get somebody to come to their own conclusion, that is the moment that they are going to make change. And very little of me just going off about my experience about something or my beliefs or this is what the system and the SOP says or whatever. Very little of that ever amounts to meaningful change in a behavior. So if I can walk somebody through the discovery of how they got to their problem, whether it's a problem they recognize or it's like a performance issue that is, that I need them to recognize. But um, walking them through how the problem, started and why did it start? What were some of the levers that were pulled to get us to where we are right now and get them to
Hmm.
the moment where they realize a lot of this is really realizing ownership in a situation. It's like understanding how insidious a victim mindset can be,
Yeah.
and where often we feel like we are unable to take the next step to solve a problem that we have because that next step involves somebody else or some system that we don't have access to or something. That's almost never the case, right? Like there's almost always a way that we can assume more responsibility and ownership of the situation and get creative about the solutions. But that only works if you can get somebody to the point of realization where they understand that they are the main character in whatever problem they're having and that
Yeah.
they are able to solve it. And that happens usually through 5 whys. So it's basically me asking you, um, I'm trying to think of a good solution off the cuff or a good scenario off the
Yeah.
cuff, but well, you're talking about a situation and you tell me that, oh, I didn't get to work on time because the bus was late. Okay, well, like why was the bus late? Okay, this is a really bad scenario because I don't know why the
It's all good. Yeah, yeah,
probably
yeah.
bus is
But
late.
it's just somebody brings some kind of excuse, right? Or some kind of like victim oriented reasoning. And then you can just dig in, ask why, ask why, ask why to kind of help them uncover and acknowledge that you have ownership, right? Like to kind of get them to address the extreme ownership framing of the issue that
Right.
arose.
And it usually takes about five whys to get to the
Five
root
was.
cause or the bottom line. Clear out all the
Nice.
noise.
Love it.
And
Love
then
it.
will you
Yeah.
remind me the second part of the question because I just forgot.
Yeah, I was curious. There we go. Curious to see if there was any way that you have found
Expedite,
to,
yeah.
yeah, expedite the process of like helping the leaders that you coach adopt that curiosity lens. Like, is there any fast track to it? Is there any shortcut? Typically there's not, especially for a kind of like habit and reframe and mindset shift like that. But curious to see if there is any way that you found to expedite the process instead of going through like a year long of journaling every day. Is there any fast track that you've found?
Yeah, I mean, I really think understanding how to ask the right questions is the cheat code. Um, so the expediting process, I guess, or like the way to expedite that process is by coming up with like learning which questions you're going to help you get to the root, get
Hmm.
the answer, get the person that you're talking to, um, either to recognize their ownership in something, or if you're doing an interview with somebody, it's less about like tell me your experience, and that's the general question, and it's just more specific and specific questions about like what they personally like. How do you think about the role that you're in and your responsibilities, about your performance, getting them to really talk more about whatever the subject matter it is that you have, like the questions that get you to the root cause faster. And I think that's
Yeah.
really the only key code, but it
Yeah,
is one of those things that does require a lot of intention.
for sure.
And that intention, like it evolves, the experience evolves. I would recommend that, taking the time to like really see how your mind shifts as you become better at asking good questions about being curious with other people and the transformative experience of your relationships and your interactions with people. I think that there's a lot of magic in that journey. It might
Yeah,
not be for everybody, but I think that that's an important part of the process.
100%. And I think whenever we're not talking about like how to write better ad copy where you can like execute on that tactic tomorrow, the next time that you write a headline kind of thing, but we're talking about a deep rooted shift in mindset. I think no matter who you are, it's going to be something that takes time, but it all starts with just an awareness of how much more productive that lens is of leading with curiosity in every interaction that you have in personal and professional life. I think having the awareness of how much more productive it is, and understanding that the root of it is just really listening, like getting you to listen and just turn your ego off for a minute and just listen, understanding that you can learn from anybody, and every situation. You don't know it all. So I think it starts with the awareness of how much more productive it is, and then it's just an intentional focus on nurturing it and building it into a habit over time, however that works for you. For you, that was journaling. This is something that I gotta figure out and work on. Like, how can I nurture that mindset and that habit for me? And I think it's just like an awareness of the triggers of like, okay, where do I find myself, trying to instill my will into a conversation or a discussion with somebody, and then just recognizing the trigger of like, okay, I need to be more curious right now. I need to step into this conversation with a little bit more curiosity. And then I think the other thing that you mentioned too is something that's been huge for me, is just the idea or mindset, you could call it, of extreme ownership. That book by Jocko Willink changed my life. But
Okay.
it really is just every outcome in your life you can take extreme ownership over, right? Like traffic, whatever. Like, I should have left early, missed the bus. I should have had an alternative way of getting to work on time. Just that frame of extreme ownership over every outcome in your life, and never, um, I don't want to say like using a victim mentality excuse, I guess, is just so unproductive. But the lens and framing of extreme ownership over every outcome in your life is really empowering, and it's
Yeah.
just easily the most productive. Um, just blaming other people for the problems in your life isn't going to get you anywhere. At the end of the day, everything is up to you. Like, nobody's coming to save you. It's up to you in order to create the life that you want or create the outcome that you want, no matter where you are. If you're a leader, if you're an employee, wherever you're at, it's up to you to create nobody is coming to save you. Nobody's going to um, do the things that you need to do in order to get what you want. It's up to you at the end of the day. And having that framing of extreme ownership over every outcome in your life is the most productive way to getting you there. So I think those two things are really great. Um, Kind of changing gears here a little bit. So you've spent a couple decades leading teams in hospitality, an industry I don't know a ton about, but I've gotten a chance to learn from you, learn from Sue at 100 Mile Brewing Co. But in hospitality, communication is absolutely critical, and can make or break the culture. So what is like one communication system or rhythm that you believe every team should install in order to kind of prevent the breakdowns in communication that can lead to issues?
Yeah. So, couple different ways I could answer this question, but I think I'm going to start with the one that has been kind of, it's been a topic of conversation in at least four of my clients' journeys lately. And that is, it's not so much a system, maybe a rhythm, but where a lot of communication breaks down is that it's not necessarily that there isn't a system set up for, like, we use Slack or we use Google Chat or we use text message or whatever. It's not that there aren't
Yeah,
those sometimes it is, but often
there's
there
the
are
min.
systems in place. Like, there is something that is designated as the method of communication for that business,
Mhm,
or that team.
mhm.
But people, a lot of the time, I would even say most of the time, certainly in the hospitality industry, I've seen this a lot in the hospitality industry. It's kind of known to be, a place of gossip and all sorts of stories that people like to tell each other in the walk-in coolers or over a beer after their shift or whatever. But I know that it exists in other industries as well. But instead of going right to the person that either they are the source of your anger, they are the reason that you have the problem that you're talking about, um, instead of going right to that person, they talk about it. So they talk about it to other people, right? It becomes then this story that they tell themselves and they tell other people about how, this system is broken or this customer did X or this boss did whatever. And, they're not talking to the person that can fix their problem. So we're spending time reliving whatever difficult circumstances or gossipy, story we heard from somebody else about something that is like shock and awe inducing.
Yeah,
We're spending time talking about the problem, but we're not spending time fixing the problem, talking to the person that can help you.
yep.
So I don't know why in this last couple of months, this has just been like so frequent of a conversation, um, but it has been. And I think, getting systems in place, including like if you have an issue, the only person that you go and talk about that issue is the person that the issue originated with or the
Hmm.
person that can solve your problem. So if I'm mad because my kitchen display screens are broken, right? And it's caused this huge problem in my restaurant. We don't see what orders are coming through in the kitchen. We don't know how long they're taking because we call it KDS for short, kitchen display screens. But the KDS screens are down. And so it's causing this huge, upset in the operation. And the team is struggling with it and the guests aren't getting what they want. And so there's two things I could do. I could complain about it. I could sit here and
Yeah.
talk to you about it, could talk to the people next to me. I could be texting my boyfriend or my mom or whoever. And I could
Or
just
you.
really like be on a venting session, right?
Yeah. Right.
Oh, this is so horrible. Everything's going to suck because of this. Or I can pick up the phone and call the IT guy that's going to fix my kitchen display screen and we can fix it and then we can move on and
Yeah.
everybody can win, right? So that's a
Hmm.
pretty basic example, but that I think happens so often. And I think a lot of
Yeah.
it has to do with the median age of people that we work with in the industry. They don't really have very developed communication skills yet. Maybe they haven't really had a situation where they had to be held accountable for solving a
Right.
problem or whatever. Um, and like I said, it does happen in other industries, but like this is also something personally that like once I had this awareness that I could either be using my words and my energy and effort to push myself further ahead to all of my
Hmm.
goals, or I could be using it to stay the same, right? Which is basically
Yeah.
moving backwards.
Right.
Then just like the curiosity is a superpower insight, I started working on that with a professional focus, and all of a sudden everything in my life became subject to applying curiosity. And the same is true for communication. So if I've got a problem with my boyfriend, I am not calling anybody about that. I'm like,
Yeah.
maybe I will, depending on the severity of the problem, but he is the only person that's going to solve that problem for me. And if I call
Right.
somebody to get advice or guidance on it, they're not even probably going to give me the best advice because they weren't there for the situation. They hear my side of the story. They don't understand all the different, the complexities of and the background of what got us here. And then I'm going to tell them that entire story, which might take me 30 minutes. There's 30 minutes of my life I haven't gotten back, and I still haven't solved my problem.
Right. Yeah. It's just symptoms of, like you said, a lack of like the curiosity lens. That really sounds like a symptom of a lack of like an extreme ownership kind of mindset too. It's like I can either go and complain about the problem to other people that aren't going to help me fix it, or I can take ownership and be like, okay, what can I do right now that can help us solve this problem? Right. For you, you're probably hearing from a lot of leaders. And I would imagine, like, given your role where you're consulting a lot of these leaders, like, I know how that can, you're probably hearing a lot of this from them, and then you have to sit there and listen, let them get it out, let them vent, then you have to ask the hard question. It's like, okay, so what can you do about it? Right? How are we going to fix this problem? Right? Is us talking about this right now going to fix the problem, or as soon as we get off this call here together, are we going to call the IT guy, get it fixed, and then now it's done? Right now it's no longer a problem. Right? So it's just the kind of like the victim mindset that I think that would be a big symptom of. But like you talked about, the type of people that work in hospitality businesses are typically younger people who don't have a ton of experience, and just, haven't like matured into a professional environment quite yet. But I think if that kind of thing is happening in an organization, that almost feels like a symptom of just like a culture that isn't encouraging people to
100%.
understand, like, to find solutions, right? A culture that isn't encouraging people to find solutions is just a culture that's allowing people to just complain, right? And almost be like fearful of confrontation, or, giving feedback, things like that, right? And giving feedback and, telling people like, hey, I need you to get this fixed can be a really hard thing to do unless it's just like something that is showing up every single day in the culture, right? And you're seeing other people, like, top down, bottom up, throughout the entire organization doing that every single day. And that's another thing, like with the gossiping and, victim mentality isn't just like the frontline employees complaining about the leadership. It can be the leadership complaining about the frontline employees. Like I've been there. Like I've been, venting with my business partner. It's like, man, like God, this guy needs to be doing this. And it's just like, okay, why am I talking about this with him? We know what we need to do. We need to have a direct conversation with that person to get it fixed. But anyways, just a big symptom of the lack of extreme ownership, which I think is something that should be instilled in the culture of an organization, which I think is a good segue because we spent a ton of time talking about this. And, I've been nerding out a little bit over the last couple of years and like, okay, what is culture actually? How do you define what culture is? But when you begin working with clients, right, you help clients develop leaders within their organizations and make better hiring decisions, like make better people decisions to bring the right people on the bus. But before you even start working with clients, you work with them to clarify what their culture is. So I guess why do you start with that? Like, why is having a clear understanding of what your culture is the first step in making any good hiring decision? And then what is the scope of that? Like, what is culture in an organization?
So the understanding somebody's culture before I help them find the right people is a relatively new strategy that I've implemented probably in the last 6 months. Because it took me that long to realize that, or to be able to, like, I think I knew this in the back of my mind, but hiring for people for myself in a culture that I had worked on and helped to create for, almost a decade, and then helping other people find the right people for their business is a little bit different. The way that you apply that knowledge is a little bit different.
For sure.
And it may have actually been when working with 100 Mile that it occurred to me that I needed to make that like the foundational first step as I was thinking
Hmm.
about all of the other clients that I work with and the process of helping them find, hire, train, onboard the right leadership for their teams. Um, Unless you understand how the person, like, skill sets, qualifications aside, like those are important to an extent, but you could have the most qualified person with all of the experience that, like in theory is going to help them really succeed and help your business succeed. But if their values are not in alignment with your values, and if you cannot see them interacting with the team and your business effectively, doesn't matter what their skill sets are, doesn't matter at all.
Yeah.
And I've seen that first, like, I can't tell you how many times I hired somebody because of their resume, because of the experience they had. Particularly, I like to say this all the time. I can teach somebody how to count inventory all day. I cannot teach them how to align with my values, right? So I've hired people because they had done the same work, the same tasks. Maybe they worked with the same software systems, or, they had a experience with the same systems or processes that I used. And that's why I hired them. And then you get them into the brand and they are awful, right? Like the team
Yeah.
doesn't like them. The team isn't going to follow them. They've got all these character traits that are just, you cannot actually see them operating long term within the culture of your business because of, it's like putting a bull in a china closet. Um,
Yeah.
and so, like, to kind of answer the second part of your question as I finished answering the first part, like, I think the culture of your business is like how the people operate. It is the way that they think about your business, the way that
Mm.
they operate as if they were owners, or like as if it
Yeah.
were the business that they had created, I guess. There's a better way to say that
Mhm.
that I'm totally coming up short on right now. Um
Yeah, I think that's great.
but like the culture, since I'm in 100 Mile today, using them as a reference point, the culture is verbalized through their core values. And
Right.
their core values are all set on behaviors. Like, how do you behave when you're inside the restaurant? Like, what is a behavior
Hmm.
that is 100 Mile specific behavior? Commitment to community and interacting with the community and commitment to quality and freshness, right? Like things that are 100-mile specific. Um,
Yep.
so somebody that aligns with the culture, that you can see them you can see them thriving, not just showing up to be punch the clock and do the job and then leave, but see them thriving, see
Right.
them being like a positive contributor and getting a lot of value out of their experience, because it
Hmm.
matters that they get a lot out of the experience as well, right? Um,
And they care, and
and
they just care about what we're working
yeah,
on.
yes.
Yeah.
But if they like their behaviors when you're interviewing them and you're asking them questions for the interview that are not just about their skills and qualifications, but also about like who they are, like what's important to them, what are their values. And if they
Right.
say that, um, they are really passionate about delivering the freshest possible food. Like they don't like food waste, and they don't like processed food. They cook a lot at home, and they take care in the preparation of their food, and they understand a lot about like food preparation. That
Yep.
is probably an indicator that their values would align with our values as a
Yeah.
company. If they talk a lot about how they interact with the community IRL instead of like, scrolling through social media all day, like then, and we have
Right.
a very specific value that, an important value around the community and how we impact the community, then that would be another indicator that their values are in alignment with the culture.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's a lesson that you only learn when you make the mistake, but you hire for culture, not for technical ability, right? And in order to hire for culture, you need to have your culture clarified. So that is why it's the critical first step in order to making any right hiring decision is you need to hire for culture, and in order to do that, you need to have culture clarified. And I think the way that you describe culture, if I can do my best to try and repeat it back to you, I think culture is made up of so with every business, you need to have clarity on why do we exist? What are we here to do? Why? Like what is our why? What is our mission, right? What are we here to do? Why do we exist as a business? That's the mission. And then you have a vision of what you want to, like the change that you want to create in the world. Like what is the impact that we want to have in whatever world we're serving, right? For 100 Mile Brewing Co., that's the local Tempe community, right? Like what is the vision that we have of the change that we want to create in the world? So why do we exist? What is the change we want to make in the world? The mission and vision. And then the values are how are we going to act? Like how are we going to behave en route towards that mission, towards that vision? So like that in my mind are like the three critical elements of any culture are the mission, vision, and values, right? Everybody's heard that.
Hmm.
So once you get clarity on that, then you can evaluate somebody on how well they're going to um, not matriculate, but like how well are they going to fit in to that environment? Are they going to come in and are they going to clash? Like, are they going to really just like how enthusiastic is that person going to be? Because like you just want a team of people that give a shit, like a team of people that care about what you're doing and show up excited every single day
That's
and are going to go about what you do the way that you want it done with the rest of the team, because you just want a team of people that all care. And then when you bring another person on that cares, that just raises the conviction and the enthusiasm of everybody else that's on board. Like it's like, oh, we're not all crazy, right? We got another person on the bus with us that's going to do this with us. That's going to do this really hard thing with us. Because growing any business is the hardest thing to do. All right, it's really hard. So it takes a level of, I don't know, there's just like passion or enthusiasm, I guess is what I'm going for in order to achieve anything really
fine.
meaningful. Um,
I was
yeah, alignment. Yeah, exactly. So you just want everybody that you bring on to just care, right? And do things the way that you want them done. And I think that's what culture is. And then,
Yeah.
how you evaluate for that is another tough question. I guess maybe I could just ask that question of you. Like how do you evaluate for culture fit during that interview
Yeah, I
process?
think a lot of it goes back to like finding the right questions to ask, probably based on whatever position you're hiring for. And getting insight, kind of a little bit of reading between the lines. If somebody tells you that they've left their last three jobs because they couldn't stand the manager,
Yeah.
possible that the managers have not been the problem, right? It's possible that this person, however qualified they are, however bright and shiny and on time they showed up to the interview and their availability is exactly what you're looking for, um, that they have some character traits that are the reason that they left their last 3 jobs and were mad at the manager, right? So there's
Yeah.
some of it that's kind of reading between the lines, but if I'm hiring for somebody for 100 Mile, then, I'm asking questions that help me to understand what their beliefs or like their current behavior surrounding community involvement is. Um,
Hmm.
there
Yep.
I'm finding out whether like they truly are they here because they want a job and they like beer, or are they here
Yeah.
because they love the brand? And there are, it's
Yep.
really hard when you're a new brand to find people that really align with your culture, because a lot of times like you might have the culture visually identified, but you haven't had enough time to actually, grow it before, to
Yeah.
incubate it and to help it take shape.
Have a lot of like the culture champions too, like the people within like in-house that really represent and embody what you're trying to build.
Right, exactly. So a lot of that is kind of theoretical, it's at first. And then the other
Hmm.
challenge is that when you first open a restaurant, unless you're opening one under a big name brand like Fox Restaurant Concepts or, similar, Upward Projects, any of the Phoenix specific hospitality brands, then you
Hmm.
are starting that journey of looking for people as the seekers of great people. When you get to a
Right.
point where your culture is defined and the community is responding to it, then you become the sought after. So
Right.
that can make it a little bit tricky to actually find the people that are going to help shape the culture that you want at first. Once you have a little bit of traction, it becomes a lot easier. Like when you become the sought after and people are like, I really want to work there because I love, I'm on your Instagram. I've come to
Yep.
these events. I love what's on your menu. But more than that, I love the way I feel when I'm inside your establishment. And so I want to be a part of it because I feel like I could
Hmm.
really, add to what you've already created here. So questions that help you to understand if that person, matches skill set, qualifications, and is somebody who's really going to add a lot of value and get value from the experience. It's a mutually beneficial experience because that's where you get your culture champions. And that's where you get
Yep.
people that are not there for a stop along the way, but they're looking for some place that they can build some roots. They can save for a little bit. Maybe, 3 to 5
Yeah.
years is kind of a long time in the hospitality industry, but it's ideal
Yeah.
when you are building a team full of people that are not all going to leave in 6 months, and then you're constantly on the hamster wheel of recruiting and hiring and training.
Right. 100%. Yeah. The big thing that I keep hearing is when you're hiring for culture, you're looking for somebody that just cares about what you care about. Like they care about the same things that you do. Call it 50%, 75% of any one restaurant, like one restaurant to the other, they all do pretty much the same thing, but that there's, little nuances in how they go about doing it that just represent what that culture cares about. And you just want to bring people on that just care about the same things that you do, right? Like with 100 Mile Brewing Co., they care about having the highest quality foods. I know how much Sue cares about the community in Tempe, or like, so every person that you bring on, you want them to align and care about the same things that you do, to kind of elevate and reaffirm that culture that you're trying to build. Um, Cool. Couple more questions. Thanks so much for the time again here today. These are a little bit more tactical questions. Um, so we got two. One related to how you can go about nurturing and developing leaders within your organization. So you talked about how, you want to get people in and then have them stay within your organization for 3 to 5 years plus, like a long time. You want to get somebody in the organization that cares about what you care about, aligns with the culture, and then you can nurture and develop them from there. Um, so like how do you like leadership development systems, right? Leadership development process. Why is it so important to have an intentional process for developing leaders internally so you don't have to go out and, headhunt leaders every single time you need, a new GM position or something like that? And then what does a leadership development process actually look like when it's working well in an organization?
Sure. So why is it important to internally develop leaders? I think for a lot of the reasons that we just got done talking about, you want people that are going to care about what you care about. And especially if they're going to be leading other people, then it is, you can do everything right in the recruiting selection process for a leader inside of your business. You can make sure their skills and qualifications match, that they, mention things throughout the interview process that suggest that they do align with your culture and your values. You can do background check, you can do reference checks, you can do everything right. And then you get somebody in, out of training, and it becomes evident that you missed something, or that maybe what they said in their interview was said because they knew that that was important to you and not because they actually meant it or aligned, right? So it
Mhm.
is very risky to hire an external leader. It's not bad. I mean,
Yeah.
there are times where I think that having an external leader hired and entered into a business infuses new ideas, new energy. It's not always a bad idea, but
Yeah.
I know a lot of companies operate with like the 70-30 rule these days, where 70% of your leadership is internal promotes and 30% is externally sourced. And I think that's a great number to shoot for. So in order to have
Nice.
people to promote, you have to, like, it doesn't just happen by accident. Sometimes it does, but the most successful leadership development systems that I've seen happen on purpose. They happen intentionally. They happen when you first hire somebody and you provide them a thorough training and onboarding experience where there's no risk that they're going to get out of that training experience. And then you have to coach them on something a couple weeks later and they're like, oh, I wasn't trained on that. Right. So
Mhm.
it really, like, it doesn't matter if somebody's with you for 2 years before they get promoted, or there's a conversation about developing into a bigger role, or if it's like 2 months. It all starts on their first day. And the demonstration
Yep.
of investment into their development, whether they are or they aren't interested in becoming a leader or becoming, like some sort of different role than they're in, it doesn't really matter. The if you can provide them with um an experience where they feel like they are valued, they understand how to grow, and they believe that they've got growth potential inside of your company, whether that's just to grow their income or whether it's to grow their experience
Yeah.
and their skill
Skill set.
sets, then that's pretty much a winning equation right there. You are
Yeah.
going to have them for a lot longer of a time. Maybe we talked about this on the GPT call that we had, but in my former brands, we had a little experiment. We were running up on like really tough turnover numbers, and turnover in the hospitality industry is kind of just a given. It's like, well, it's very transient. People come and go, they're on their way to something else. Like, you never get people to stay for more than a year in a hospitality role. Well, I started like really wondering why that was. Um, why is that? Like, why have we just decided that that's the way that it is? And
Yeah.
nobody's thought, well, how do you make it better? Right? How do you change it? So we started asking the team for feedback as to, like, why do you decide to go somewhere else? The automatic assumption that I had and that every one of the managers had was that people are going to go somewhere else because they're going to make more money. And while that's not always untrue, we were surprised to find that the majority of people said that they were going somewhere else because they had more opportunity to grow. So maybe they can get 50 cents more an hour at the restaurant down the street, but they would be more likely to turn that opportunity down and to stay where they are if they had a definitive process that they could see, that they saw happening in action, that was going to help them grow new skill
Mhm.
sets. It was going to help them, make more money, make that extra 50 cents while without having to change jobs, right? Changing jobs is hard.
Right.
So some people love
Yeah.
it. Most people don't. They do it out of necessity. They do it because they feel like they don't have a pathway forward. So
Yeah.
putting that development process in place for leaders looks a lot like, a PDP, a personal development plan. I have a whole process here that involves identifying attributes that you don't have, but you would need or you want to grow in order to be eligible for a specific position. And then with those
Yeah.
attributes identified, you choose certain behaviors, like very specific behaviors. If I am great at time management, this is how I do that. These are the actions, I like block things off on my calendar. I make it a rule to leave 5 minutes
Yep.
early and to check maps to make sure I'm not going to run into traffic and I can plan a smarter route. Like there are behaviors that I employ in order to
Hmm.
grow this attribute to give me the skill set that I'm looking for. So for leaders, that's pretty specific. But I think that this process works for everybody. And sometimes it just means you give them like an ambassador role. So maybe in a restaurant, this could be, I'm taking this from Unreasonable Hospitality, which is one of the best books I've ever read in my entire life. But the author of that book, who is the GM of three Michelin star restaurant in New York City called 11 Madison Park. Every single person on the team was an ambassador of some area. You had an ambassador of polishing the silverware. You had an ambassador of um like the dreamscape or something. He actually had a whole person that was just their whole ambassador role was to find creative ways to make the guest's day, make the experience memorable, which is pretty cool.
Awesome.
But everybody in that restaurant had ownership over an area. And if they demonstrated that they could execute that reliably, consistently, to the level that they were expected to execute, then maybe they were considered, maybe that was an indicator that they could take on more. And if they wanted more, then that was kind of the qualifier to be in a conversation for taking on more was that if you're the silverware ambassador, that silverware was polished. There were no water spots. It was where it was supposed to be, in the shape it was supposed to be in, all day, every day. So things like
Hmm.
that, I think, are
Love
easy
it.
ways to, create development process for everybody on the team, regardless of whether they have leadership aspirations or not.
Love it. And it all kind of rhymes with what we've talked about up until this point. It's just you have to be intentional about developing leaders within your organization. Like you said, it's not going to happen accidentally. And I think if the metric that you're shooting for is 70% of your leaders come from internal promotions, you're going to have some kind of intentional process of developing the people within your organization. And that's going to, have so many benefits. Like two of those specific benefits being one, you're not going to go out and have to headhunt and kind of roll the dice with an outside hire for a leader. And then number two, it's also going to create um, more of an incentive for the people who do join your team to stay with you longer, because you just brought up a point of most people were leaving not because they were getting more money somewhere else, but because they had a clear path for growth in another opportunity. And that's, I think, what people are looking for, especially younger people that are more prone to take hospitality types of jobs. They're looking for growth and opportunities to develop their skill sets, or at least the people that you want on your team are going to be those people that are looking for growth and opportunities to grow their skill sets, right, and grow within the organization. That's the kind of people that you want. So you want to create the incentives that attract those kinds of people, which is an intentional leadership development process. And I think one of those creative ideas that you shared was like, how can we create different ambassadors for the little different, like the little elements of the client or service experience? I think that's super cool. And you're like the fourth person that's brought up Unreasonable Hospitality to me in the last week. That's definitely a book
You
that
have,
I got to read.
yeah,
Um, yeah, that sounds awesome. But yeah, it just all comes back to being intentional, right? And then with every person, they get their own PDP, right? Personal development plan. And that is all articulated on day one. So if you have time here for one last question, I would love to talk about that like what a world-class first day for any new hire and that onboarding process looks like. Because I've had you explain that to me in a previous conversation. I remember some gold nuggets from that. So, everything starts with day one. So what does that world-class first day look like for any new hire?
absolutely.
Um, yeah, for any
This
new
is
hire.
a passion point for me. So, because I've
Love it.
seen how a world-class first day results in a high-performing team member, and how a less lack of a world-class first day um,
Yeah.
results in the opposite. So I think the biggest, easiest point about a world-class first day is preparation. It is everybody that needs to know about that new person starting is informed. They have the time planned for it. The new hire does not walk in feeling like they are an afterthought or an inconvenience, right? Because if that's what their experience is, then that's exactly what you're going to get from them when they are out of training, provided they even have training. And
Mhm.
delivering whatever service that or job function that they were hired for. If they don't feel like a priority, there's absolutely no chance in hell they are going to make you a priority. So preparedness,
Yeah.
everybody that needs to know about it, whether it's the owner that leads the orientation or the general manager, whether it's a combination of people, they have the time blacked out, and that person for that amount of time, that new hire is their number one priority. You've got all your materials, and company handbook, training packet, schedule, whatever those materials are. A lot of places do this digitally now instead of printing it all out, which makes a lot more sense than printing out a bunch of stuff. Um, but like you've
Yeah.
got some sort of visual aid, whether it's a TV monitor and you've got a presentation or you're just using your computer or whatever it might be, then you've got all those materials there ready to go. You're not fishing around your computer, looking in files, trying to put it together. Like you are prepared. You've got all of your materials. If there's a uniform, you've asked them in advance what size they are, and you've got their uniform ready. Using 100 Mile as the example again, since I'm here today, 100 Mile gives their new hires 2 t-shirts, whether they're front or back of the house, they get 2 100 Mile t-shirts. And sometimes if they didn't ask that new team member what size they were and the team member shows up on their first day and they're in between shipments, they might be out of that size, which might seem like an insignificant detail, but it actually is pretty significant, right? Because it is just a further demonstration
Mhm.
to the new team member that they didn't expect that they were going to need these tools, right? These items
Yeah.
that the employee is expected to wear. So then they're going to have to wear something a little too small or a little too big, which doesn't set them up for success. So you have all your materials, you
No.
have the time carved out. You have, if you're new at doing some sort of onboarding session, then I would say you've got a little bit of a dress rehearsal because it can be the most awkward thing ever for both the onboarder and the onboardee. If you are
For sure.
obviously awkward trying to find your next words, trying to pull up everything, like you've had a little bit of a dress rehearsal. So you feel confident
Mhm.
in the presentation of an onboarding experience. And then that team member walks away feeling confident about their decision to come work for you and clear about what their role is.
Yeah.
And they also, I think this also lends itself to um, more personal accountability over their role because of the way that you showed up to that onboarding experience. There's snacks or
Yep.
beverages, right? Like, especially in a hospitality, but not only in a hospitality. If you're having like more than a 2-hour onboarding, have a couple of snacks or have some beverages. Like, make it an enjoyable experience for your new hire because otherwise you're just kind of sitting there droning on over really dry materials like a handbook, policies
Yeah.
and things.
I think you even brought up a point too. It's like if you could find out a way to just figure out like what's their favorite kind of coffee, like what's their order from Starbucks or whatever, and just show up, have that ready for them. Like some like little element, like you talked about with the unreasonable hospitality, the person's the dream catcher, whatever it was. Like find like one thing that'll make their day about the onboarding experience of like you put some thought into
Very
personalizing
much.
this for them somehow, right? Like whether that's just a simple their order from Starbucks or whatnot.
Yes, absolutely.
Thanks for listening to my conversation with Bethany Graver. My takeaways from the conversation were as follows. Number one, curiosity is a superpower. It forces you to slow down and actually listen. It allows you to see the person or the problem that you're facing in front of you with fewer assumptions. Number two, growth comes once you start taking ownership. The moment that you stop blaming circumstances and start asking better questions, being curious, everything in your world begins to open up. But take ownership, extreme ownership. And third, a great hire starts by getting clear on what your culture is in your organization, right? Hire for culture, not for the resume. And what is culture? It's the shared mission of why you exist, the vision of where you're going, and the values that guide your team how to behave on the way there. And when you know that, You can hire people who care about the same things that you do and will thrive inside the environment that you're building. If you're a hospitality owner, hospitality business owner that wants to build better leaders within your organization and make smarter people decisions, connect with Bethany using the links in the description. If you're a coach, course creator, or author and want to deliver your program at scale with more consistency and less burnout, you can download my free Transformation Engine Builder Toolkit using the link in the description. It includes the tools and everything that you'll need to start building your very own transformation engine system. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.